One of the things that we've done, which has been a kind of interesting experiment, we set up a Google map where people within Worcester can go to this map and kind of leave Google a note using their own tools as to why this project would be important to them. And it's very clear from the notes that are being left, like you said, that a lot of people don't fully grasp what the project is. A lot of people view it as like a cable replacement, or a sort of adding competition to Charter or what have you. And Google, it seems, is thinking much bigger than all of this. 5 days from now, the FCC is going to be presenting to Congress our national broadband plan, which was part of the National Recovery Act of last year. And Google seems to be playing a key role in that, where the FCC is really going to be focusing on next generation high-speed internet access, nationwide, that final mile stuff. And this is going to be a component of that as sort of like a test project to see how can we actually make this happen using private resources in a decent-sized community. But the long-term goal, again, is not really to replace Charter or replace the cable companies as we know them now. It's to lay the infrastructure for technologies that don't currently exist or don't exist, in the mainstream. I think Google's big vision is don't really worry about who your cable provider is, but instead go online and find the IPTV provider like Hulu or Boxy or whatnot that works for you. And here's your super broad pipe, your dumb pipe that you can bring all of that data into your house, however you see fit. Instead of deciding if Charter is the right voice over IP service for you because it's bundled into that cable package, you can now choose from any number of voice over IP phone services to bring into the house. So I think it's more of a decentralization project, and it's you used the term I read somewhere yesterday that I have liked using as well too. It's a disruptive practice. It's another case of Google coming into a marketplace that it currently wasn't thought of being a player in, and just being extremely disruptive, but not disruptive in the way that we normally think of disruption. It's positive to the consumer, or at least on the surface appears to be a positive to the consumer, breaking up some of these smaller regional monopolies and what have you that have been a hurdle for a lot of us for a long time.
So yeah, because what we see basically is semi-monopolistic situation in the broadband market, where you've got one or two choices of broadband no matter where you live in the United States. And so our prices are not that great, our speed is not that great. There was a wonderful report out of the Berkman Center led by one of my intellectual heroes, Yochai Benkler, a couple weeks ago, talking about this, sort of trying to figure out where does the U.S. stack up globally in terms of broadband, fast internet, and not as good as we should.
We're number 17, if I'm not mistaken. The last number that I saw was we're 17 internationally, and it's an abysmal 17. If you look at where Japan is functioning somewhere in like the next century. Sweden isn't too far behind them. Even South Korea, has amazing infrastructure. In part, the one key component is there's at least in all of those countries there's at least been some guidance from the federal government as to it's the master plan that we always talk about, like on a local level. There's been some guidance on the national level telling the telcos, this is what we expect from you, this is where we need everyone to move together. And I think Google, at least has the muscle to try and make something like that happen in a very visible way. It's important for people to realize, too, what got us here isn't necessarily the fault of a lot of corporations, looking to do us wrong. Like Charter is kind of stuck with what we have now, and we're kind of stuck with them. There just aren't enough, there aren't enough households in the city of Worcester to encourage the sort of competition that you would need to accelerate growth in that marketplace here. That's where that's why the term monopoly is always frowned upon when it comes to, although I use it myself, when it comes to these regional, enclaves of communications providers in, say, Worcester, where we have just Charter. There just isn't enough business here to expect a second party come in, lay the infrastructure, and do all that work, and only at best get half of the existing market that Charter is barely able to make a profit off of.
Right, and so it's hard in general to sort of say we're going to build a separate parallel cable system or phone system or whatever just to bring you faster internet.
And now, as to why Worcester, I think, actually stands a decent
chance.
I
just want to say what Google's proposal here is. Google's proposal is to come into some mid-sized cities around the U.S., bring in internet which is potentially 20 times faster. I've seen people 100 times faster.
It's a gigabit. It'll be a solid gigabit, not gigabyte, but gigabit fiber package. So yeah, it'll be roughly 100. We see around 10 megabits now for what Charter caps out at. Fios, you roughly get about 50 megabits.
Okay.
But we won't see Fios around here for another 5-10 years or so.
Okay. So just phenomenally faster.
Insanely fast.
Insanely faster internet access for people in these communities. And Google's saying, communities, make us a
Pitch us, yeah.
Pitch us. Like there's one town that claimed that was going to Topeka temporarily name themselves
officially,
Google.
by proclamation of the mayor, is officially Google Kansas for the month of March. And that's something that I think is important to. If you hop on Google News, right? I mean, you search Google News for Google Fiber today. As of this morning, there were 281 news stories in the last 24 hours, each from individual communities around the country that are all applying for this and trying to one-up each other in terms of what can we do. I mean, there's another community that is offering Google to rename all of its firstborn children Google as a first name and Googleette for a female as a first name that are born in the month of March if they're awarded this package. I mean, and it's silly, sort of, what can we do to get the national press involved, sort of thing. But in a way, it's also meaningful because when it comes down, part of this application is a community application where members of the community need to be applying and telling their story to Google as to why this is important. And when it comes down to that, you kind of have to imagine that Google will be using its own tools like search and what have you to find the community that put the most effort into this.
And so this is potentially a big deal for Worcester. I mean, this makes it so that you can, do all kinds of amazing stuff from your house if your internet's that fast. If you're a business,
I think especially for our higher education and our healthcare sectors, this would be game changing.
Yeah.
When I think of in terms of healthcare, it's real-time diagnostics or imaging, internationally. I mean that's huge. I mean it's not. I think the residential stuff is nice. We all love the idea of fast reporting, I think, and it's been groundbreaking in terms of internet access. But when it comes to actual education and business and healthcare standards, the improvements would just be amazing. As it stands now, if you want to do a consult with someone in terms of healthcare, you usually take a DVD of an echocardiogram or whatnot, and you hand it to a courier and drive it out to Boston. That's unnecessary and it's foolish at this point. We should be able to do better. We should be able to do real-time diagnostics and imaging consults internationally at this point, but we just don't have the network speeds that make that capable.
I should have worn gloves today. My hands are getting jittery here. I wanted to ask you. So you've been one of the people who has been sort of leading the charge. Or at least helping with the charge of getting people. How's things going with Worcester saying to Google, give us this, bring us this?
I think like a lot of things, Worcester, it was a little slow out of the gate, but I've been incredibly impressed at how things have come together. And it's really, it's been, the majority of credit needs to go to Joe Petty, City Councilor Joe Petty, who has been working.
The quiet man.
The quiet man. We had no idea, that over the last 10 years, but we did know over the last 10 years that Joe's been working very hard to continue laying fiber in Worcester. And that's one of the interesting things about Worcester is we actually have a lot of fiber already laid. It's dark fiber as it stands now. We've got a couple fiber rings in the city.
So it's nothing's going over it.
Yeah, I think the city uses some of it to connect, the city hall to the school department and what have you, but it's not being used to its full potential. And a lot of that goes back to the pre-internet bubble bursting days when we were laying fiber throughout the state like gangbusters, but we never finished it off. Worcester also has a program, from what I understand, where anytime someone does utility work underground, they're also asked to lay fiber in the section of the city that they're working in. So we do have a significant amount of fiber in the city. The city council, and in particular Joe Petty, deserve a lot of credit for that. Scott Zobak from Senator Harry Chandler's office and I have been working on kind of the community aspect of things, but we've obviously needed the city's help in that regard. It's been the Economic Development Office and the Marketing Department for the city that have been just incredible in giving us the resources that they have on hand to try and make this happen. The state in constant communication. We've been working hand in hand inside City Hall, outside City Hall, to try and get as many partners within the city on board and do something meaningful, right? I mean, not just do your standard sort of municipal RFP to apply for business with a business, but instead actually get the community excited about something, and it seems to be working.